So I finished my Pomodoro clock, and it was a truly epic battle. And I learned so much in the process. First of all, what's a Pomodoro clock? So you set your session length, you set your break length, you can increment, decrement, you start it, and when it gets to 0, you hear a ding, and you can pause it and reset it, and great. Pretty simple, right? As usual. So why did it take me almost 2 weeks to do this? Well, first of all, I decided to give Redux a try. I had never made a Redux app before, and I love the idea of managing state in one place and all the components have access to it, and I wanted to give it a try. And I think it took me about 2 days to even set it up, because you have to get your actions and your reducers and connect everything, and there's so many different ways of doing it too, I discovered. So I finally found a way that kind of made sense to me, and I got my first component working. It was just this session length component, which is a simple counter really. Then I could just duplicate it, and I was on a roll, and then I got stuck. I got stuck when I tried to do the timer. And I just assumed it was something about Redux I wasn't quite getting. But I didn't really know what the problem was. And I finally just expressed my frustration on LinkedIn. And I got a lot of really good responses. And a lot of people were recommending that I learn React hooks. And I had been hearing all kinds of things about React hooks lately. It's like the latest craze. So I watched this 1-hour video that just went through useState and useEffect, and I was hooked. I was hooked on hooks. And I decided basically to start all over again using React hooks. And once I figured out how to get the timer working, I figured I could always come back to Redux later. And one great thing about React hooks is that you can use all functional components. Now, I actually enjoyed class components, but it doesn't mean you don't have to use this everywhere and all that stuff, and just simplifies things. So you just import the hooks you want to use. I really like the flexibility of useState. And my most favorite thing is useEffect. useEffect replaces all those crazy lifecycle methods. Component did mount, component will unmount, should component mount. There's just so many, and they're crazy, and useEffect just simplifies things so much. So I started over with React hooks, and it was doing great once again. But again, I got stuck. And I got stuck in the same place as I did before. So I realized my problem is I don't know how to set interval. Like, I've used set interval in regular JavaScript, no problem, pretty simple. But I'd never done it in a React component before. So once I looked into that, and I realized I'm supposed to use it in component did mount, or in this case, useEffect, I was able to get it going, set all the conditions, and voila, it worked. Apparently, I still have a lot to learn about lifecycle methods and when I need to use them and how they work, etc. Even with the beautiful useEffect hook still in place. Still need to understand why they're there. And then I got stuck again. I got a whole thing going, but one of the things that needed to happen was this little ding at the end of the cycle. Just one little ding is all I needed. But setting up the audio, I couldn't I had to use an audio tag for one thing, because that was one of the user stories, was to have an audio tag. And I couldn't use a ref the way I had before in previous apps because, like I said, not a class component anymore. It's a functional component. So that's when I learned more about this useRef hook. but it still wasn't working. So I got to ask my very first question ever on Stack Overflow. And he pointed out, I love Stack Overflow, by the way. And usually, most of my questions that I have already been asked in some form and answered in some form, and it's just a super helpful resource. And I had to go in circles for quite some time before I finally realized, okay, I don't find anywhere that this question has been answered. I better just ask it myself. And someone gave me an answer like a few hours later. It was amazing, and it worked. Now, it was something I already tried, because it's a functional component. In the docs it says you can't just do myaudio.play, you have to do myaudio.current.play. And I had already tried that, and it didn't work. But I tried it again, and it did work. Why? Because the first time I hadn't imported the audio file correctly. Oops. So make sure you have a working audio file before you assume that your code is broken, is the lesson. But I got a badge, or 5 badges, or whatever, however it works on Stack Overflow, and that was pretty awesome. But now that I got it working, I would love to go back to finish my Redux app that I had started, just to make sure I can actually do it. Something I love, or at least the idea I love about Redux, is having just one store for managing state, and all the components can draw from it. Just sounds like heaven. Now, supposedly there's a React hook called useContext, which does kind of the same thing. It's about communicating state between components and such. I haven't looked into that too much. It would be worth looking into, especially if it resolves some of those issues. But in the meantime, Redux sounds pretty awesome. A lot of companies use it for bigger applications. Don't really need it for something as small as mine, especially since it takes so long to set up in the first place. But yeah, Redux would be pretty awesome in the long term. There's that little audio beep. Such a little thing, so much pain. But the victory at the end is what we live for, right? So now it's on to the back end, which I've been looking forward to for so long.